They fired me 48 hours before a $4.5 billion acquisition required final government approval. No warning, no meeting, just a calendar invite titled Access Update and a security escort waiting outside my office at 9:12 a.m. The CFO wouldn't meet my eyes. HR read from a screen. They said restructuring. They said efficiency. They said my role was redundant now that the deal was basically done. Basically. That word stayed with me. I didn't argue. I signed nothing. I handed over my badge. I walked out while traders were still celebrating upstairs. The market hadn't even opened yet. The acquisition was public. The price was locked. The board vote was scheduled. What they didn't know was that government approval wasn't a stamp. It was a chain, and I was one of the links. By 10:30, my email was dead. By 11, my VPN failed. By noon, my name was gone from the internal directory. Clean, fast, confident. They thought removal meant neutralized. I went home, changed clothes, opened my laptop. The portal loaded slower than usual. That made my stomach tighten. For a moment, I thought they'd done it right. For a moment, I thought I was out. Then my dashboard populated. Status unchanged. Authority intact. Primary regulatory liaison. Final escalation holder. 7 years of filings don't disappear because someone clicks deactivate. I didn't touch anything. That mattered. I watched. At 1:15, an automated reminder went out to the acquiring company. Pending approval. No action required. At 2:40, the compliance buffer expired. That wasn't visible to them. It was visible to me. The system shifted the approval from green to neutral. Not blocked, not denied. Neutral is worse. Neutral means nothing moves. At 3:10, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it ring. At 3:12, another call. Legal this time. Voicemail. Concerned tone. At 3:30, the CEO called. Calm. Practiced. He said there had been a mistake. HR moved prematurely. He said the board was excited about the deal and wanted stability. He asked if I could log in and confirm the approval timeline. I asked him a question instead. I asked if I was still employed. Silence. Papers moving. He said they could reverse it. Title adjustment. Compensation review. I told him authority doesn't reverse on conversation. Systems don't care about apologies. He said the regulators were expecting confirmation by morning. I told him confirmation doesn't come from people. It comes from status. He asked what I wanted. I said nothing. That was when his voice changed. He asked how long they had. I told him the truth. If the approval didn't move by 8 a.m., the acquisition clock would pause publicly. Analysts would notice, competitors would react, share price would wobble. He said that couldn't happen. I looked at the dashboard again. Neutral, untouched. I told him it already had. If anyone manually reviewed the approval chain, my name would surface, and the board meeting was in 18 hours. By evening, the story inside the company shifted. It was no longer about restructuring. It was about urgency. Emergency calls stacked back to back. Legal looped finance. Finance looped compliance. Compliance couldn't find a reason, only a delay. That was the beauty of neutral status. No red flags, no violations, just silence where motion should be. At 7:42 p.m., the acquiring company's general counsel requested a joint call. I wasn't invited. My name still triggered automated routing blocks. They spoke around me like I didn't exist, which made every answer incomplete. By 9, the board chat lit up with speculation. Someone suggested a technical glitch. Someone else blamed the regulator backlog. No one said my name. At 10:15, the CEO texted me directly, not through corporate channels. Personal number. He said they needed to talk. He said the deal employed 12,000 people and delays would cause panic. He said this wasn't personal. I didn't reply. At 11, a courier arrived at my building with a laptop and a new badge. Overnight reinstatement, temporary credentials, a handwritten note from HR apologizing for the inconvenience. I didn't open the box. At midnight, the system rolled forward on its own. Another automated checkpoint passed without confirmation. That triggered a public disclosure requirement scheduled for market open. The acquisition would be listed as pending extended review. Analysts would read that as risk. Risk at $4.5 billion is not settle. At 5:30 a.m., I finally answered a call. It was the CEO again. No pleasantries this time. He asked me to log in. I asked him to confirm my termination had been reversed in writing. He said yes. I asked him to confirm retroactive authority. He hesitated. I told him hesitation was the problem. Authority chains don't tolerate gaps. He said the board was prepared to do whatever it took. I said boards don't control regulators. Silence. At 6:10 a.m., the acquiring company froze internal spend tied to the deal. At 6:25, their investors were notified of a possible delay. At 6:40, the market opened and the stock dipped 6% in 10 minutes. News alerts framed it as uncertainty. By 7:15, competitors started calling their contacts. By 7:30, regulators requested clarification. Formal, logged, timestamped. At 7:45, the CEO called again. This time, he didn't negotiate. He asked what it would take to restore the approval path. I told him I needed my role publicly reinstated, authority confirmed across all filings, and a written acknowledgement that my termination attempt had created regulatory exposure. He said that would be messy. I told him messy was cheaper than collapse. At 8 a.m., the board voted in an emergency session. At 8:12, my dashboard refreshed. Status unchanged. Neutral. Waiting. They had done everything except the one thing that mattered. They still thought this was about employment. It wasn't. It was about control. At 9 a.m., the chairwoman called me instead of the CEO. Her voice was steady, practiced, the kind that only appears when damage is already calculated. She didn't ask how I was. She asked what regulators needed to see to move the approval out of neutral. I told her exactly what the framework required: named signatures, confirmed authority, continuity of responsibility without interruption, acknowledgement that my removal 48 hours before close had compromised process integrity. She asked if that meant admitting fault. I said it meant admitting reality. At 9:23, the company issued an internal memo reversing my termination effective immediately, restoring my role with expanded authority, and assigning me as sole regulatory liaison for the acquisition. At 9:31, the memo was filed externally. At 9:40, my dashboard updated. One checkbox turned green. Not approval, just motion. At 10:15, the acquiring company rejoined the call. Their counsel was sharper now, asking fewer questions, listening harder. They wanted certainty. I told them certainty was earned, not requested. At 11, the regulators responded with a clarification request. Routine, procedural, the kind that only arrives when trust is being rebuilt. I answered it within 6 minutes. At noon, the market steadied. Analysts updated language from risk to delay. Delay at $4.5 billion still hurts, but it doesn't kill. At 1:30, the CEO sent another message. This one didn't ask for anything. It thanked me for protecting the company. I didn't respond. By mid-afternoon, the approval status shifted again. Pending review became conditional approval. The final gate was scheduled for the next morning. The board wanted a statement prepared in case press asked about the delay. They sent me a draft that blamed external timing. I revised it to reflect process alignment without naming names. They accepted every word. At 4:45, the chairwoman asked if I would stay on post-close. I said I would consider it. At 6, the regulators confirmed the final review window. At 8, the acquiring company lifted the spend freeze. At 9:30, the CEO called one last time. His voice was calm again, controlled, the way it had been before he thought I was disposable. He said the board approved a retention package, significant. I told him compensation wasn't the lesson, process was. Authority isn't a favor, it's a system. You either respect it or it stops you. The next morning, the approval cleared. The acquisition closed at $4.5 billion without ceremony. Headlines framed it as resilience under pressure. Internally, they called it a narrow save. No one mentioned the firing, no one mentioned the 48 hours. My name appeared once in the filings as responsible authority, exactly where it had always been. I wore the same quiet suit to the closing meeting. No one tossed me peas, no one joked. They listened. And that was the real acquisition.